They are elves, and yet not. Shadows cling to their forms, pain anchors their memories, and death is not their end, but their purpose. These are the Shadar Kai, bound to the Raven Queen and shaped by the endless twilight of the Shadowfell. In this video we'll explore who the Shadar Kai truly are, their origins, appearances, abilities, culture, and their divine patron the Raven Queen, all straight from Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition. To understand the Shadar Kai, we have to begin with their doomed history. This story has received several retcons, but we will be focusing on the 5th edition, as usual. Long ago, the elves were sprung from Corellon Larethian, god of art, magic, and change. Most elves called the Feywild home, a realm of dreamlike beauty and untamed magic. Everything changed, however, when Corellon was betrayed by his then wife, Arashni, now known as Lolth. Lolth managed to convince some of the elves to give up their ever-changing powers, binding them to one form. Enraged by his children's sacrifice, he banished all elves from Arvandor. Think elf heaven, basically. One mortal queen, however, believed to rule over an elven kingdom in the Feywild, sought to put an end to this conflict that threatened to tear apart the elven pantheon, the Seldarine. She promised her followers, who called themselves the Shadar Kai, that she would open the way back to Arvandor. All she needed was their devotion and their power. The Shadar Kai willingly took part in a ritual that would grant their souls and magic to their queen, bestowing her with the power she needed. During this ritual, however, some usurpers saw their opportunity and started funneling some of the magic to themselves in a bid to steal some of the power. Their actions doomed the ritual, corrupting it instead into a curse that drew the queen and her followers into the Shadowfell. When the dust and ash had settled, the queen looked upon the wizards that had betrayed her and let loose a scream of ebon smoke, penetrating the flesh and minds of the traitors. Their bones blackened and souls lacerated by the queen's rage, these traitors became mutated and cursed into what we now know to be Nakpas, cursed vulturish monsters doomed to wander the plains. But what of the Shadar Kai? Well, when we say elf in Dungeons & Dragons, you may think of fancy aristocracy, colorful magical prowess, or perhaps the liveliness and artistry of the moon elf. Perhaps the same was once true for the Shadar Kai, but no longer. These dark emo elves range in height from 4'10" to 6 feet, which is average to rather tall even. Beyond that, the effects of the Shadowfell can be clearly seen on them. While in the Shadowfell, they are sometimes described as corpse elves, with pallid grey, ashen skin, and even swollen joints. Their beautiful elven visage sunken into a hollow memory of what they once looked like, with baggy, dark eyes. They often wear veils and masks made of wood to cover their faces. They typically wear studded leather armor and weapons enchanted with necrotic energies. Notice how I said, while in the Shadowfell. Once a Shadar Kai leaves the realm of the gloom and darkness, on one of the many quests for the Raven Queen for example, their youthful and beautiful visage often returns. They still keep their pale skin color, but their eyes liven up, skin becomes less deathly, and they are filled with a sense of life again. Now, this isn't to say that they immediately become joyful and prance around the meadow all of a sudden. No, one of the most fascinating and tragic aspects of the Shadar Kai is how they perceive the world. You see, the Shadowfell drains emotion, dulls joy, and makes even vivid memories fade into dust. It has filled these elves with a persistent sense of dread and gloom, so far so that it is difficult for them to even experience joy. Mournful, joyless, and a constant sorrow is what these elves experience most. They are the embodiment of neutrality, neither benevolent nor malevolent. One thing that unites them all, though, is that they do not fear death. For them, death is just a minor thing. We'll get to the why on this later in the video. Now, I usually stick to the 5th edition in these videos, but I do want to give an honorable mention to previous editions for the Shadar Kai, as I use some elements still for my emo elves. In previous editions Shadar Kai, when out in the material plane, they sought out extreme emotions. Lust, ecstasy, adrenaline. They looked for it, yearned it, as they did not experience them in the Shadowfell. Couple this with their need for self-inflicted pain as a means to help keep their sanity in the Shadowfell, it makes for some very interesting stories. One of the ways they went about this, for example, was an armband with metal spikes on the inside that would sting the wearer constantly. Again, this is for older editions, but I did want to add that to this video as I think these editions do help give the Shadar Kai more personality, so play around with it. Quick note, if you're enjoying the video, do boop that like button and let me know in the comments because I would love to make more of these again and add value for you all. From the Feywild to the Shadowfell, but what exactly is this realm where the Shadar Kai dwell? Well, the Shadowfell is, much like the Feywild, a sort of echo of the material plane. But while the Feywild is vibrant and colorful, everything in the Shadowfell is muted and bleak. Skies are overcast, the air hangs heavy, and color itself seems faded. Light sources seem to illuminate not quite as much as some would expect, while shadows stretch farther than they normally would. Now when I say an echo, I do mean an echo. Areas, landscapes, and cities that exist in the material plane can also be found here in the Shadowfell, albeit a bit more gloomy. And not just gloomy, but just slightly off as well. Buildings resemble their material plane version, though just a little bit different. Different layout, different materials used. Even on subsequent visits to the Shadowfell, a traveler might find some landmarks have shifted from where they found them before, or cities just slightly changed. These cities, as well as cities of the Shadar Kai themselves, form their homes, and also where visitors to the Shadowfell can find their bearings. Yes, the Shadowfell has visitors. People hoping to be granted a favor by the Raven Queen. And though the Shadar Kai know better than to meddle in their goddess's affairs, they do try and warn these visitors, help them prepare for whatever tests the Raven Queen might set them to. Small spoiler for Act 2 in Baldur's Gate 3, the area you find Dame Aelin in right before Moonrise Towers is an area within the Shadowfell. But who then is the Raven Queen? As we said before, there are some major differences between editions, but in 5th edition, the Raven Queen was an elven queen that sought to gain divinity, promising her followers the way back to Arvandor. Her failure, because of the betrayal of the wizards, the loss of her kingdom, and the damnation of her people, drove the Raven Queen mad. In her divine madness, these emotions, formed with the still lingering power of the Fail ritual, transformed her, breaking down her physical form. The Shadowfell littered with memories of the dead and dark energies, the dissipating Raven Queen used the last vestiges of her powers to shape these energies around herself, containing her essence. Over the centuries, these memories formed the mysterious entity that is now known as the Raven Queen. The Shadar Kai witnessed their queen's descent into madness, formed into this divine entity, and now carry out her will. Obsessed with secrets and memories, she sends out her loyal followers to gather these fragments. Guided by her ravens, the Shadar Kai are able to travel to where the barriers between realities are fragile enough so they can pass through. Whether it's a soul, a memory, or even an event still to happen like a lover's feud or an all-out war, the Shadar Kai wait patiently, interpreting the raven's cryptic cawing to their destination and to whatever the Raven Queen desired of them. Should a Shadar Kai fall, their goddess is able to collect their souls and return them to the Shadowfell and remake them. A blessing of immortality, a curse of eternal servitude. This is why many Shadar Kai care little for their current mortal shell. The memories collected are stored in her fortress of memories. Trinkets, items, souls, and memories, as long as they are filled with longing, sorrow, pain, remorse, or guilt, they are irresistible to the Raven Queen. In the wider multiverse, the Shadar Kai are rare, but far-reaching. They appear suddenly, complete their tasks, and vanish like a fading dream. To many, they are little more than legends or omens of death. Adventuring Shadar Kai may be exiles, chosen agents of the Raven Queen, or perhaps still those seeking emotional purpose outside of the Shadowfell. A Shadar Kai adventurer might collect memories like treasure, mark their kills with ritual scars, or keep silent in reverence to their queen. However they journey, they carry with them the shadows of their homeland and the cold breath of fate. In Baldur's Gate 3, we find one such Shadar Kai, he who was, accompanied by a raven as he is gathering the memory of a fallen dwarf. In gameplay terms, the Shadar Kai are a subrace of elves featured in Mordenkainen Presents Monsters of the Multiverse. They retain the Fey ancestry trait, giving them advantage on saving throws they make to avoid or end the charmed condition. Keen senses make it so they have proficiency in the perception skill. And of course, necrotic resistance, allowing them to have resistance to necrotic damage, as well as dark vision and trance. But their signature ability is the Blessing of the Raven Queen. As a bonus action, they can magically teleport up to 30 feet to an unoccupied space they can see. They can use this trait a number of times equal to their proficiency bonus, and they regain all expended uses after finishing a long rest. Starting at 3rd level, they also gain resistance to all damage when they teleport using this trait. The resistance lasts until the start of their next turn. During that time, they appear ghostly and translucent. Mechanically, this makes them excellent for characters who rely on mobility and survivability. Narratively, it reflects their ghost-like movement and their divine connection to shadow and death. I rolled a Shadar Kai Phantom Rogue for a one-shot, and I loved how it played, both mechanically and roleplay-wise, having to collect souls into a trinket to aid my own abilities. The Shadar Kai are not just shadowy elves. They are reflections of loss, endurance, and transformation. In a world where memory fades and pain is proof of life, they fight to remain themselves, even in darkness. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this lore deep dive, boop that like button and make sure to check out my lore video on the dark goddess Shar, and subscribe for more D&D insights from across the plains. And remember, when the shadows whisper, the Shadar Kai may already be watching.